Welcome into another edition of VU Sports Wired. I'm Max Schneider alongside Simon Gibbs and Ryan Sheehy in this week for Bobby Kent. We are so excited to be back. Vanderbilt had a bye week last week, so we had a bye week last week. But we're back coming off the bye and ready to go this week. Vanderbilt takes on South Carolina in Columbia at 6:30 Central Time this weekend. Huge must-win game for the Commodores. But before we look at South Carolina, let's take a look back at Missouri a couple weeks ago. Vanderbilt going into that game needing a win, not just to save the season, but to save Derek Mason's job for the time being. And Mason came out swinging in this game. Guys, what did you see from Vanderbilt early in this game, and what did you see in particular from Derek Mason that really showed that he was ready to take on this game?
Derek Mason showed us that a lot of people want this job, but he's the only one that was built for this job, as he said in the post-game presser emphatically. But what we saw from Derek Mason was a bit of a different game, bit of a different game plan entering this ball game. There were a lot more, long passes. Of course, there's the Mo Hassan change, which is first and foremost the coaching highlight of perhaps his tenure here at Vanderbilt, because absolutely no one saw it coming. And he put in Mo Hassan. Mo Hassan executed with almost perfection until his injury midway through the game. And what I saw in terms of play calling was that Hassan had the unique ability to check down, give the ball to Keyshawn Vaughn on little screen passes, and also complete the passes more than 5 to 7 yards, like the other two quarterbacks have done this so far this season. So I think it came down to picking up chunk yardage on offense. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think they played a good 4 quarters. You saw a third quarter interception. They shut down Mizzou. I will say, though, 22nd ranked Mizzou, come on. They went over to Kentucky the next week and they lost. I don't know if 22 is the right ranking.
Maybe took the wind out of the sails a little bit. Ryan, what do you think?
As far as Mason goes, I think, not to take too much away from him, but I think more of his contributions was, and as you said, putting in Mo Hassan. It was a gutsy call, especially having had Riley Neal starting all year. But additionally, the defense, I feel, has really been almost like a weak link for the Commodores this season.
Absolutely.
Especially when in past seasons it's been a strong suit. I mean, Mason's a defensive coach. There's been more emphasis. It's always been, the problem is the Commodores not being able to score any points. And in this game, not only did they shut down the Tigers, but they did it when it mattered. There was 0 points in the fourth quarter, second half interception.
They had a touchdown in the entire first half.
Exactly.
It's like,
no, it was perfect defensive performance. It was exactly what they needed against a team that's traditionally known for their offense in Mizzou. And then he made the bold choice to put in Mo Hassan, and I feel like the offense started clicking after that. Like you said, Hassan, I don't know if something got misassessed during camp or what, but his ability to complete those balls down the field, and also we saw his athleticism on the touchdown run. He has a lot of tools that were not exemplified when Neal was on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said about the defense, especially their second half play. I mean, this is a defense that usually comes out flat in the second half. It's a team that usually comes out flat in the second half. And that's been Vanderbilt's struggle for years now. They're not a great second half football team. And to see what they did coming out of the second half, really the only points for Missouri there come off a pick from Riley Neal that they almost run back, and they get the ball on, the 4-yard line, the 6-yard line? I mean, anyone's going to score from that field position. So Vanderbilt's defense essentially allowed 7 points on drives the entire game. That's about as much as you can ask for against a ranked opponent of any kind, especially with the two, with Kelly Bryant at quarterback and with Larry Roundtree at running back. That's a really, really good 1-2 punch offensively. That's a tough team to shut down. Missouri had scored 30-plus points in 11 straight SEC games. 11 straight games, dating back to last year, and Vanderbilt shut them down like it was nothing. I mean, that's what was so impressive to me, and I agree with Mo Hassan as well. Gutsy move. Hassan was not on anyone's radar this week. I mean,
absolutely
you had heard some
he was
people
practicing
calling,
at wide receiver.
He was, and they tried to convert him to wide receiver in the spring. He was never supposed to be the starting quarterback for this team. You were hearing more Alan Walters calls than you were hearing Mo Hassan calls. And really, it was a gutsy choice, and it was the right choice, and it might have saved Derek Mason his job, because Hassan brought something to this offense that we haven't seen for years, even with Kyle Shermer, and that's mobility at the quarterback position. It was extremely impressive to see him move out of the pocket, to see him pick up first downs. That 3rd and 15 play where he rushes the ball down to the 1-yard line from the 21, that doesn't happen with Riley Neal at quarterback. That doesn't happen with Deuce Wallace at quarterback. I was incredibly impressed with what I saw from Mo Hassan. Going forward, Hassan is coming off a concussion. He hasn't been practicing with those first-team reps. that he really needs is a guy who hasn't played 4 full quarters. So how does he kind of stay in that rhythm and take on a South Carolina team that, while South Carolina's 3-5, this is a team that beat Georgia not too long ago?
Right. I mean, first and foremost, we know he's still technically in the concussion protocol. I don't think it's good that he's missing the first team snaps, as you alluded to, but I don't think there's much of a question, at least internally, that he'll play. Of course, I'm making assumptions here. I'm pretty sure he'll be okay, good to go come South Carolina. I think that bye week was absolutely huge. Could not have come at a better time. You know, he needed the extra week off after the concussion. As for what he can do moving forward to keep that momentum going, I just think he'll need some help as soon as he gets into the game. You know, he's not going to put the team on his back and keep doing what he was doing last week right off the bat. He might have to rely on Keyshawn Vaughn a little bit for the first possession or two, but that's okay. I think Vaughn should be able to pick up the slack, and therefore, hopefully, he can keep doing what he's doing through the air.
Absolutely. And I think the Vaughn point is really important because if you look back at the Missouri game in which Hassan came in and they remained competitive, not only did it help, because if you really look at it, Hassan did a great job on offense, but overall 21 points is not a lot to put up.
Yeah.
When you look back, Vaughn had almost 30 carries.
Yeah, he didn't.
And he barely even, I don't even think he cracked 100 yards. So he was just pounding and pounding and pounding away, just salting the clock away. And that's the type of effort and the type of offensive help that I think Hassan is going to need. He's going to need somebody who can consistently take the load off of his shoulders if it gets to be too much and this defense starts to get after him. And that's what Vanderbilt has really been lacking all year. Is opponents have been keying in on Vaughn since there's been no real passing threat from the quarterback. And so when you see Hassan apparently who has these abilities to really stretch the field and utilize these weapons, Lipscomb, Whitney.
Yeah.
Pinkney, sorry. You know, you really start to see that Vaughn is going to get more opportunities. Eventually, holes are going to open up, and he has to be able to, in turn, give that same leverage to Hassan.
Yeah, definitely with Hassan, with Vaughn, rather. I loved seeing Vaughn carry the ball 29 times in this game.
Yeah,
I don't care that
year.
he only averaged 3.3 yards a carry. I don't care because that's what Vanderbilt needed to do. They needed to understand that Vaughn is their best player and establish the run the way they did. And in past weeks, in losses, we've seen Keyshawn Vaughn carrying the ball 15, 16 times a game. He's really the best. He's the best offensive player this team has, and he's their biggest weapon. So to give him the ball 15, 16 times and throw it 41 doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
I loved what I saw from this game. Mo Hassan only had to throw 11 passes in this game, and he was able to manage the game. He was able to be efficient in those 11 passes, largely because they open up that passing game with Keyshawn Vaughn. Because they key against the run, they know we're gonna stick 7 in the box, we're gonna stick 8 in the box on these plays because we're gonna make sure Keyshawn Vaughn doesn't beat us, and that's fine. That's fine. If teams are gonna open up the passing game for Hassan, and he's not gonna make those mistakes, he's very capable of leading this team down the field on touchdown drives.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we spoke a little bit about how we think Mo Hassan can pick up from where he left off, but how do you think the Commodore defense can pick up from where they left off and prepare for a South Carolina team that, frankly, beat Georgia 3 weeks ago and almost beat Florida the week after that?
It's going to have to be the front four, and it was the front four this past week. And what I really noticed about the front four against Missouri that I hadn't seen all year was this team really set the edge, and that forced Roundtree to run in between the tackles in the run game. It also did let Kelly Bryant get outside. I mean, Kelly Bryant carried the ball 16 times, but he was dancing around looking for running lanes. He was uncomfortable. And that's what they're going to have to do with Helinski this week against South Carolina. They're going to have to make him uncomfortable in the pocket, and they hadn't been able to do that. They did it against Missouri. Odangbo lived in the backfield against Missouri. Andre Mintz lived in the backfield. Those are two guys. They're 2-year starters in this program.
Right.
So they're the anchors of this defense, and they finally showed it this past week. They're going to have to do it again if they want to beat South Carolina.
Absolutely. And to counterpoint to that a little bit is South Carolina in the past few weeks has not really been an offensive powerhouse, so to speak. So I'm not as worried if the Commodores are able to maintain this defensive intensity that they had in the Missouri game. If Mason's able to build off of that and keep that momentum rolling, I think they can absolutely hold them to 21, 15, something like that points-wise. What I'm more concerned about is the offense. However, the turnover margin is probably going to wind up being the most important thing here, just because you have a young quarterback, and if you're going to run Keyshawn 30 times, there's going to be times where you go 3 and out. You need those possessions, that extra, the extra opportunities, and that's what getting, say, an interception here and a fumble recovery here is going to do for you. especially with a backup quarterback. People forget Helsinki was not the starter at the beginning of the season. It was Jake Bentley. So he's only had maybe, half a dozen games here to really get used to the system. And we're seeing that that's starting to not pay off for them in a lot of ways because he's not able to really, really guide this offense. So I think the defense being able to put pressure on him, make him uncomfortable, is going to be more effective than it would be in a normal situation. And additionally, if they can use that to force him into turnovers, it's going to make things way easier on Hassan, who has limited practice time and hasn't really started that many games.
Also, this is a very minor aspect, but there are 3 dimensions to this game, and you do need your special teams to keep performing the way they did. Harrison Smith coming off an SEC Special Teams Player of the Week performance where he averaged 53 yards a punt. That's always helpful, especially for a Commodore team that punts the ball a lot. So Harrison Smith hopefully can keep doing what he's doing, pinning the opposing team back behind their own 20-yard line.
Yep, I mean, Vanderbilt struggled with field position problems a little bit this year. Harrison Smith really covered that up in the best way. Looking forward next week to South Carolina. Vanderbilt opens as a 15.5-point underdog at the Gamecocks. Guys, 15.5 for a team that just knocked off a ranked team and is coming off a bye with some newfound life. Do you think this line is kind of disrespectful to Vanderbilt? Do you think it's inaccurate? What are your reactions to finding out this is a 15.5-point line against a 3-5 team that's also playing a backup quarterback?
Max, as much as I hope that the Commodores pick up this ball game, I might even bet on the South Carolina side if I were a betting man, because in this situation, it's hard to trust the Commodore offense to even score 15 points in a game. So for them to cover that 15-point spread might be tough if South Carolina has their way and puts up 22, 23 points. The Commodores have had games where they've barely gotten off the ground running on offense. I don't know if they'll be able to score 20-plus points. But truth be told, if their offense can stay to where they were last week, the Commodores not only have a chance to cover, they have a chance to win. I just am not sure if the offense from the first possession of the game will hit the ground running as they take on South Carolina away, which is probably the most important factor because the momentum was certainly on their side in their stadium on homecoming weekend against Mizzou. It's going to be quite a different scene at South Carolina.
Absolutely. Something I found kind of funny after finding out the line was 15.5 is that's almost exactly the Vanderbilt scoring differential this season.
Is it really?
Vandy's scoring differential is currently minus 15.2.
That's not good.
Exactly. So, I mean, and that's against, sure, you've had some Georgia and LSU in there, but you've also had UNLV and a lot of teams that they should have like kind of expanded that margin a little bit. So I don't think it's outrageous to put the line there at all.
Right.
You're playing against a team. Obviously, they've beaten Georgia. Yes, they've had some difficulties against, Tennessee last week. That was just atrocious. But all things considered, this is a team that most people would expect to beat Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt, aside from the Missouri game, really hasn't given a whole lot of reason to hope. Now, we just went over some reasons why that might not be the case. But if things go wrong, especially like if they go wrong very early in this game, I don't know if I see the Commodores recovering and really maintaining that resiliency to carry over from the prior win against Missouri.
Yep, Vanderbilt, 15.5 I think is a lot. I just do. And I know that this is a 2-5 team, and I know that South Carolina has beaten Georgia, and they put up some big scoring games this year. I just think this is a different confidence with Hassan at quarterback. I don't know how he's going to play this week. Right. But just from what I saw last time last time Vanderbilt took the field, I mean, usually on incomplete passes, you have Pinckney, you have Lipscomb walking back to the huddle with their heads down. I mean, there was no confidence in this unit. There was no confidence in Riley Neal. This team played with more confidence. This team played with more swagger with Mo Hassan at quarterback. And I think that's enough to close a 15.5-point gap. I really do, especially the way this defense is played. I mean, let's not forget, Vanderbilt put up 24 points against Purdue, then put up 38, only 24 of them offensively, but 38 points against LSU the next week. That's the #1 team in the country right now. I mean, this is a team that put up 38 points against the #1 team in the country, and we're talking about maybe they can't score 15 against South Carolina. Maybe you're right, but the way I'm looking at this team right now, the way they have things clicking against Missouri, this is not a great football team by any stretch. This is not a football team that's going to make a bowl game by any stretch. Well, but if they're going to do it, it's going to have to start this week, and I think it can with South Carolina. Yeah. Not going to say they're going to win this game. I think anybody who can read a line would think that South Carolina is going to win this game. But 15.5 just seems like a lot to me, and I'm especially surprised that it's given a South Carolina team that has struggled as much as they have this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And one thing I wanted to make note of now that you bring up LSU is what are your thoughts on LSU being the #1 team in the country over Alabama this week?
LSU is the #1. I mean,
I agree.
Listen, if LSU played Alabama on a neutral site, I would take Alabama 10 times out of 10. I really would. I think they're just a better football program. I think they're just a better football team. But when you look at LSU, the wins are better. They're better wins. They've deserve to be #1
more
team.
than Alabama
and that's
has
the
impressed.
difference right now. When you talk about AP rankings and you talk about what they're really doing, and I don't know what they, sometimes they'll say we're looking for the best teams. They're looking for the best resumes. And that's what they're doing. When the college football playoff comes out, maybe that's a little bit of a different story. But right now, LSU has the best resume in the country. They're an undefeated team with really big wins at Texas, over Florida. This is a team that deserves to be #1, and I'm not surprised they're #1. I think Alabama will end the season #1. I think maybe Ohio State will end the season #1. I would take both of those teams to beat LSU on a neutral site. But right now, LSU deserves to be where they are.
I don't know about Ohio State beating them.
I don't even know about
I have been the
Alabama
most
beating them,
impressed
to be
with Ohio
honest.
State.
Really?
I have been the most impressed with Ohio State. None of those games are close. Ohio State, they haven't played too tough of opponents yet, but they just played a Wisconsin team this weekend that was the best, arguably the best defense in the country, the 7th-ranked team in the country coming into that game, and they dominated them for 4 quarters. They absolutely dominated them. Justin Fields probably should be starting for Georgia right now. He looks like a better quarterback to me than Jake Fromm does, and Georgia's a top 10 team. I mean, this is a really good football team in Ohio State. I'd be surprised if they're not in the playoff at the end of the year. The only team that's really going to knock them out, it would be Penn State, and I just don't see it happening.
I'm gonna contest you on that LSU versus Bama statement. I think the Tigers, if there's ever a year that LSU was gonna get revenge on Nick Saban, this is it. I mean, the biggest knock on LSU last year and in previous years was they can't score points, and now Joe Burrow is a leading Heisman candidate because they're scoring so many points. Like, that is, there's new problems, is that they're not focusing enough on the defense, which used to be like
that's the difference
possibly
for
the
the
best.
record. That's
so you think that's the problem?
I would, if I had the #1 pick in the draft today, I would take Joe Burrow. I would not take Tua. But that Alabama defense is a better defense.
Oh, that's absurd.
That Alabama
absurd.
defense
That's
is a better
not
defense.
absurd.
It's just a better defense, and that's the reason. LSU has not shown me defensively that they're the best team in the country. They let up 38 points to Vanderbilt.
That was
24 to Vanderbilt.
They let up 24 to Vanderbilt, playing their first-team defense for 2 possessions.
But LSU-Alabama games traditionally have not been shootout games. This is a game that's been 9-6, 27-0 over the past 5 years. Those are 2 of the scores of that game. I mean, this is not a team that's going to put up 38 points against Alabama. I just think that defense is too good.
I understand that, but you have to understand, they've also gone up against, just like you said, they've gone up against other defenses that are fairly good. They're playing in the SEC West, which is probably the most difficult division in college sports. They've already beaten Florida, and I don't think that Florida really held them to that few points. I think it was, 20, 30 points?
42-28.
Like, did you drop 40 on what is now the #6 team in the country? Like, that's absurd.
Although I think Florida's overranked too. But anyways, they will be playing next week, not this week, but it will be at Alabama. So that's where I think the rankings switches once more.
CBS decision makers absolutely kicking themselves that they somehow did not put that in the night slot game. I don't know how that doesn't happen, but someone made it.
It's a 2:30 game, I believe.
It's a 2:30 game, 2:30 on CBS. Big game, LSU, Alabama. I will be traveling down to Florida for the Florida Vanderbilt game, not LSU, Alabama. Instead, I'll be watching the better SEC showdown that week when Vanderbilt takes on Florida. That'll do it for this week of Sports Wired. Thank you so much for listening. From Ryan Sheehy and Simon Gibbs, I'm Max Schneider. We will be back next week to talk about Vandy, South Carolina, and preview that Vanderbilt game in the swamp against Florida. Should be a good one. We'll see you guys next week.